we should be eating things that are indigenous to where we are indigenous. We live here, we should be eating what's grown here. In where I live in New Jersey, we grow corn and tomatoes. Both of them are very heavily genetically modified. Fermented food is very good for your gut. You should be eating some of that as well. In addition to taking the acidophilus, because a lot of the probiotics that are in the acidophilus will probably die before they ever get out of your stomach. So you want something that's got a lot of billions of organisms. With peanuts, they are susceptible to a mold called aflatoxin. And aflatoxin is carcinogenic. It's important to know that. And there was an experiment that I read about at one point that was done on rats. And they injected them each with aflatoxin, which is a carcinogen, a low-grade carcinogen. And then they fed them different levels of protein. And the protein, depending on how high the level of protein was, would either turn on or turn off the aflatoxin.
Hi there, I'm Sifu Slim, and today is going to be a great discussion about diet, mindset, the psychology behind our impulses, shopping, storing our food, maybe even supplements. That'll be an interesting thing to share with someone who may know quite a bit about that. So I'm Sifu Slim, and I'm coming to you from my annual ski trip in Colorado, and I'm about a little under 2 hours west of Denver. And I was telling my lovely guest, Karen, that the annual ski trip is not just for, I would say, recreation and skiing. It's really something that helps me reset. So it's at the Christmas, so it also runs in the New Year, so that's the beginning of the year. And it's also a gratitude thing that I express to the universe, the planet, the United States, because I'm usually in Colorado, thankfully, the state of Colorado. And it's also a budgetary thing. So years ago, I said to myself, the ski trip does something to me that seems to last an entire year. And it's almost like having a weekly or periodic session with a counselor, which could cost $200 or $300 per session. So what I do with it is I use it for my mind, body, and spirit, and a way to rejoice, a way to see the winter wonderland, and thank the universe for the gifts that I've been given, and thank myself for the hard work that I've been given, and then also take my psychology to a level that is excited, it's released, and it's therapeutic for me. So over to Karen and have her introduce herself. Karen Sammer, coming to us from Ringgoes, New Jersey, and we'll talk a little bit more about my background in New Jersey. Say hello, Karen.
Hi, Sifu, and everybody else. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here, and I'm listening to you talk about your gratitude practice and your reason for going to Denver. And I think that's amazing. I think that is so much more beneficial than paying somebody else to listen to your problems. If you can do what you just talked about in nature, I think we should, if we could all do that, I think it'd be a much better world.
So the annual powwow or the periodic powwows that Indian tribes had, either like the Ogallala Sioux, the distant bands of Ogallala Sioux, or Indian tribes, we know that many different tribes got together at certain times because it was good for mixing the gene pool and finding people with different skills. And maybe one area was overpopulated, so they take some people and put them with a different band who had different territory. And even in the modern era in 2023, where we are, or 24, where we are now, the Indian tribes, Native American First Peoples tribes, they still do these annual events or periodic events where they can celebrate life and get out of their mind and get into the drums and the dancing and watch the kids and see nature. So all these things, I think, are part of our heritage. And if we honor that heritage, good things can come of that. What do you think, Karen?
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we really need to get back to what is basic human nature. I think we've gotten so far away from that with our industrialized living that I think that if we could get just basic, I mean, that's the best word I can come up with, is just get back to nature and the rhythm of the earth and the rhythm of life. I think that we would do ourselves a big favor.
Yeah, rhythm is a really important thing. And I'm glad you mentioned that word. I should use rhythm more in my coaching people. By the way, for people out there, I'm a fitness, wellness, and life coach. And while people think of me in my books having a lot to do with physical activity, movement, and the connection between mind and body, there is the other thing that's a big part of my life and my concentration is eating properly, which comes from shopping properly, listening to your body, even watching what your stools are doing and where your gas is, where your breath is, where your energy levels are. All these things are so important. And I'll share with you what I currently did for breakfast. So I normally like steel cut oats, and all these things at the end of what I say, I'm going to ask Karen to weigh in on and tell me what she thinks. But normally I'm doing steel cut oats, not every day, but if I were to do oats, steel cut oats that I soak overnight. So it makes them absorb, just kind of like a rice absorbs. And then I cook them the next day. But right now I'm using old-fashioned organic oats. And so one of my friends who's really into research and diet says these are denatured, so you don't want to do those, blah, blah, blah. So in a minute, I'll ask Karen what she thinks about that question. And then I'll either do some sort of a protein and a fat. And here's raw cashews, which are very cheap compared to walnuts. And I think they last a lot longer. I do like walnuts, though. I use all kinds of nuts. And then today I didn't do the nuts. I did avocado. I have 4 avocados and they are currently ripe, ready to be eaten. So I have to move my way through avocados. And I usually do 1 avocado and a half a lemon per day. And then to help my microbiome after a cold that I just went through where I had to do some antibiotics, first time in 15 years maybe, I'm doing some 4 times 6 now is the company, acidophilus. And I believe in the idea that you don't just put probiotics in there, you need prebiotics. And so I'm actually eating, just like a goat would eat greens, I'm eating the celery and giving the fiber and the prebiotics a chance to do their thing and maybe mingle with this acidophilus so that my stomach acids hopefully aren't just wiping out the probiotics that I'm inserting in there through a pill form. So over to Karen, and if you need me to remind you about any of these things that I just shared, just mention that and I'll pick one up, but we can maybe tap into your expertise in this dietary area.
Okay, thanks, Sifu. So the oats, I would agree that steel cut oats are probably the highest quality of oats that you could eat. You really want to make sure that they are organic because oats have been found to have a lot of pesticide in them. Glyphosate is the offending substance here.
Chemical.
And yes, and it is also, it's very prevalent in oats, so you want to be really careful. And I wouldn't eat them every day. I would eat them, add them as part of a rotation in your dietary choices. But certainly steel cut is the highest quality because it's got most of the good stuff in it. They haven't stripped out. Yes, yeah, because the rolled oats typically will have some of the bran and the germ taken out of it. I think those are the names, but the stuff that really is the beneficial aspect of the oats. So steel cut is they're hard, they're They take longer to cook. Anything that takes longer to cook typically is probably
Air Force.
will be better for us. Yes.
Oh,
Anything that requires
more
any
work,
kind of experience.
more work
Yeah,
tends to be better. Is that it?
that's right. Absolutely. That's right. You have to work for your food. That was the, I mean, we're
Picking,
here, we're supposed to do that. We're supposed to work for our food.
picking your own apples out of the tree back when we were kids, we thought it was fun, but when you're a 40-year-old farmer, 60-year-old farmer who's been doing it for decades, maybe it's not as fun, but you know that's the best way to do it, correct?
Absolutely. Yes, I agree with you, Stephen. But so you asked me about the acidophilus, and my recommendation in the course of taking the antibiotics, as you are taking the antibiotics, you should probably also be taking a probiotic. So not only afterwards, but during the course of it, but never
I
together.
did so. Yeah, I did
Okay.
so. I was so glad I learned about the probiotics maybe 25 years ago that I'm definitely doing that. I grew up in a very German area in Oldwick, New Jersey, which was called New Germantown from age 10 to 18, and my dad still lives there. And I learned from my German heritage and grandparents about sauerkraut
Yeah,
and
great stuff.
good stuff. And they, you know, and these Germans were hardy people, and it's like France, and it's probably a little colder than France. It's cold and dreary for 6, 7 months a year sometimes. And these people are out working in fields. They're in basements, which could be moist. They're in the cellars, you know, and they're working with a lot of food and putting up their vegetables and fruit and eating that. So it's a lot of indoor living in the wintertime. And so those probiotics probably, you know, mixed with, if they had cod liver oil and things for vitamin D, I think there's A in there too, and some of these things, they probably a good way that they were able to survive through those challenging times.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But fermented food is very good for your gut. You should be eating some of that as well. Not in addition to taking the acidophilus, because a lot of the probiotics that are in the acidophilus will probably die before they ever get out of your stomach. So you want something that's got a lot of billions of organisms,
Yeah.
right? Bacteria, to hopefully get enough of them into your intestines that they make a difference. But then there was something else that you were talking about. What was
I put some
Oh,
fat in there. I don't know how much protein is in an avocado. I would guess not too much. The nuts have, I believe, fat and protein. So tell me what you think about having that with my oatmeal.
I think that's wonderful. Avocado is really good for you. It does not have a ton of protein. It has some. Everything that's been alive has protein in it because the cells require protein to be alive. So avocados have a really good healthy fats and a number of other things going on there that are very helpful. And they also keep you happy, you know, keep you satisfied, keep you filled up. Yeah, filled up for till the next meal. And then the nuts with the fiber, and both avocados also have fiber, but the nuts have fiber and protein and fat and a lot of stuff going on there. And I would vary the nuts. I saw you went to Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's has a good selection.
Yeah.
But I think that if you vary the nuts, because each type of nut has a different benefit, gives you a different benefit. Yeah. So I would definitely vary those.
Peanuts, according to the research that I've read, are the trickiest ones because they can get moldy right on the tree, and then distance shipping them and storing them, they tend to have, because of their shell's absorption maybe, or just the way the whole thing works, and their high oil and fat content, they're susceptible to mold. So that's a tricky one, and I don't want to tell people not to eat them, but be wary of the dates and find a trusted source where you actually trust the shipping and the storage date, because it's we're in this industrial world where, if you stored something and you've got millions of pounds of that stuff and you don't sell it at its time, are you going to keep it for another 3 months, 6 months, a year and a half? And I'm susceptible to thinking that yes, these companies will do that if they can get away with it, and if they have moldy stuff, maybe they'll just pay a fine, or maybe they'll have a friend who's in the government let them off the hook. I mean, that's how these things work. It's unfortunate, but I tend not to trust those things.
I agree with you. And with peanuts, they are susceptible to a mold called aflatoxin. And aflatoxin is carcinogenic. So it's important to know that. And there was an experiment that I read about at one point that was done on rats. And they were able to they injected them each with aflatoxin, which is a carcinogen, a low-grade carcinogen. And then they fed them different levels of protein. And the protein, depending on how high the level of protein was, would either turn on or turn off the aflatoxin carcinogen. And it was very interesting. So protein on top of that. So you have peanuts that have protein in them, and you combine them with this aflatoxin. I tend to not eat peanuts or peanut butter because of that. Even organic, and it's especially, it's more prevalent in this country than it is on imported peanuts. So it was smart of you to limit your peanuts.
Yeah, my intake on those, it's really, it's hard to know what the right thing is to do. It's the biggest challenge I have in this 2024, and it's been increasing in terms of how challenging it is to find good fresh food. Not even talking about affordable. Affordable is another thing. When you've got a $2.50 high-end apple, right? It's affordability is almost gone out the window in the United States. But just finding good quality food. You know, America has, I forget, what's the number, 7 billion people? Does that sound right?
No, that's the whole world, I think.
Oh,
7 or 8 billion.
7 or 8 billion.
It's many hundreds of millions, though.
Yeah, almost 400.
Million.
Is it almost 400 million that the United States has, something like that? And it's just, you have to, and in the world, 7 billion going to 9 billion. Feeding the world is such a challenge. And then distance shipping. So how few things do we eat in our local area? I've been living in Santa Barbara since 2004, and I met the people who were on the lemon committee at their annual event at a park one time, and they were telling me about the lemon shipping. I said, how many of the lemons from Santa Barbara make it to the stores in Santa Barbara? And he said, none of the ones who are the larger produce companies, none of the larger farmers have their lemons go to Santa Barbara. This was in 2008, I asked him this question, and they all get distance shipped to people who pay a lot of money for them. Japan, other places, maybe in Europe, other places in the United States, and then they get processed out from there. So it's crazy how we do our food as compared to when you and I were growing up and our grandparents were growing up. Much more local food that you could walk over to your neighbor's house or walk into town, trade some people for what they had, and then you're just getting much more high quality food if the weather was cooperating and providing water and sun and whatever else the produce needed. Over to you, Karen.
Yeah, I agree with you. We don't eat local, and that's really what we should be eating, seafood. We should be eating things that are indigenous to where we are indigenous. We live here. We should be eating what's grown here. In where I live in New Jersey, we grow corn and tomatoes. Both of them are very heavily genetically modified. That's another thing. That's another issue that I think we are setting our multiple generations down up for some significant health problems, because I think the GMOs are really going to, that I don't think we know the extent of the GMO damage yet. I really think they're way too young. It's way too young a science to really know what the full impact of that is. But as far as what you're talking about, yes, food travels all the way around the world before it gets to us, and I shop at Costco quite often, and I've been getting blueberries and strawberries there because my grandson really loves them, but the strawberries look awful. And you know that they were shot with whatever it is they shoot them with to make them ripen quickly, but they were picked really too early. They traveled all the way around the world because they weren't grown here in December and January. They were grown somewhere warm, and I just feel like we need to kind of come back to compressing the way we live and live within the climate and the environment that we are living in. So eating things that we should be eating seasonally, growing our own food if possible. If you have the time, the land to do that, you have a little bit more control over the quality of the food that you're eating. But it's really hard. We're very industrialized, and we've gotten away from that agrarian lifestyle. And
the small garden lifestyle.
And yes, exactly. Yeah, because it all takes time, and people have stressed themselves out and overcommitted themselves to things, and are working outside of the home, often far away, commuting, coming home very stressed and not really interested in getting their hands dirty. But even getting your hands dirty, putting your hands in the soil is very good for you. The microbes are very good for you. Um,
Yeah, besides the microbes in the soil, the microbiome of the soil, like I went to an organic farm a number of years ago, and the woman giving us the tour, who was the owner with her husband, she said, if you have really good soil and you're buying these things from someone like me, don't wash all of the ground off of your carrot. She said, leave a little bit on there and eat it. And she said, that's what your grandparents and great grandparents were doing. And they flourished through hard times because of, their gut health and these types of things, and the sauerkraut and all the other things we mentioned. And then they're also using their body, so they're not living in their head. They're wording, but they're not living in their head like we do. We tend to live in our head, and I tell people that the job of the body in the modern era, as opposed to our grandparents or great grandparents who were actually using their body, the job of the body in the modern era is to carry around the head, because that's where we live.
That's so true. Oh my gosh, it's so true, Sifu. And it is. You're right. Our bodies are meant to work. Our bodies are machines that are meant to do the job that they were put on this planet for, and that is gathering food, hunting and gathering, foraging. We were meant to be working for our sustenance, and we don't physically do that anymore.
Yeah.
Now we sit behind a desk or computer and do whatever it is that we do to get money to go out and buy the food that somebody else grew.
Yeah. I'm going to reach out to the audience right now and say, please give us a like and a thumbs up. And then I'm going to share our website. So the easiest one for me is Sifu, S-I-F-U Slim.com. And that will lead you to all of my different profiles and books, social media, these types of things. And I have over 1,000 videos now on my 2 YouTube channels. So I hope some of that information is entertaining and informative. And then Karen Sammer, who's a CNC, and she can tell us about some of her background. She's got lots of nice certificates, and she's really committed to her clientele and to her learning, to her improvement in her field, growing, etc. And her website is yourpoweryourhealth.com. So I'm glad she got that. That was probably a good find in signing up for that one, because that's a real impactful website she has. And while she's telling us about herself, I'm going to click over and share screen and jump on her website so we can take a look at that while she's speaking.
Hi, this is Sifu Slim, author of The Aging Athlete. In this book, you're going to get to hear about 2 different groups of former high-performance athletes. One group, which is made up of 90% of the former athletes, does not do physical activity on a regular basis and tends to suffer the consequences of a sedentary lifestyle. The other group, which is made up of 10% of the former athletes, is doing physical activity on a regular basis and tends to thrive through the aging process, or at least has a better chance at coping with the aging process. We could have taken these folks to a lab and done all kinds of tests on them. Instead, we slowed them down and sat them down and asked them, in their own words, to describe why they are wired the way they are, so that we all, former athletes and non-athletes, can use some of their inspirational and motivational and mindset lessons in our own lives. I hope you pick up a copy today. You can go to theagingathlete.com. And when you have a chance to read it, I'd love to hear back from you to find out what your thoughts are on the stories of these aging athletes.
So thank you very much, Sifu. So I am a board certified health and wellness coach, as well as a CNC, which is a certified nutritional consultant. So I've gone through a lot of training to do what I do. And I got here because back in 2009, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive form of breast cancer. And at the time, there may be there's the picture. He's going to bring up the picture of me. This picture right here is what I looked like when I had the diagnosis. And I had no idea this picture was being taken. I never would have allowed that to happen. But I was as you could see, I was very overweight. I had high blood pressure. I had high cholesterol. My blood sugar was a little bit wonky. So I was on my way to pre-diabetes. Actually, I was pre-diabetic. And then I was under a lot of stress. I was working a very stressful job. I was raising 2 kids, and it was a tough time. So it was no surprise to me, quite honestly, that I was diagnosed with some sort of life-threatening illness, because clearly I wasn't getting the messages before that. I needed to get the big message. So it made me stop, and I had to stop my life for about 6 months to take care of myself. And in the process of doing that, I lost 135 pounds, and I got all my numbers in order. I overcame the cancer, and I decided that in the process of learning what I learned about that for me, I wanted to show other people, because it had such a huge impact in my life. I was able to do things I hadn't been able to do in years. And I had no aches and pains. I had a lot of energy. I was feeling really well and healthy. I could move around the world much more easily. It was just an amazing revolution in my life. And so I decided to go to school to become a health coach, and then furthered my education by becoming a certified nutritional consultant. And then I was, I've just been continuing my training, and I recently became board certified, national board certification in health and wellness coaching. So that's where I am, and I offer free consultation to anybody who would like one, so they can
Click
find out.
here.
Yes, that's right. Schedule a free consult. You can schedule a meeting with me. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. What we do is we look at your health profile, and we can identify some things that I can help you with. If you choose to work with me, great. If not, you'll still walk away with some action steps that will get you started on your path to wellness. And I tell you, there is nothing like it. If you've been on the other side and have come to this side, the change is remarkable. It's absolutely astounding how different you would feel.
Is someone on the standard American diet already sick?
Probably, whether they know it or not. Because do you know that I think within 10 years, within a decade, more than 50% of the American population will be at least pre-diabetic, if not diabetic, and many of them don't even know it. And many people are walking around now not knowing it. And it is all dietary lifestyle, stress. So it's sedentary life. It's eating the stuff that we call food. It is managing the unrelenting, or not managing the unrelenting stress that we're under, not getting enough sleep that causes your hunger hormones to go all crazy, and you don't know when you're satisfied, and you just keep eating. It's a perfect snowball of mess that we put ourselves in that cause these illnesses. Because I fully believe that my breast cancer was caused by my lifestyle and the choices that I was making at the time. I got the message finally.
I met a nurse practitioner who had been working in cancer. She was in her 60s. And I met her back in 1992, about 2 weeks after my friend's wife, who was a really nice person, very giving, church-oriented, had a baby now who was a few years old. And she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I wasn't working in wellness at the time, but I was really, for myself, I was a proponent of mind, body, and spirit wellness, and lived a very Jack LaLanne, mixed with a dietitian, mixed with a yogi who knows about sleep and meditation. I was already doing that for myself, and I looked at what my friend and his wife ate frequently, which was pizza. And a lot of the pasta dishes and cheese, a lot of cheese.
Yeah.
So you got the oils, the sugar, the lactose, and all these types of things. And I didn't ask this nurse practitioner, who was unrelated to my friends, about pizza. And I said, have you seen an increase in cancer, and most notably breast cancer, over the last part of your career? And she said, oh, definitely. And I said, what do you attribute that to? And she said, pizza, pasta, cheese, all of the easily chewable foods that we shovel into our mouths. She said,
Yeah.
that's not the case. She said, look up the chew statistics from your grandparents' era when they're eating occasionally, not every day, a meat dish where you have 25 chews to get that meat, swallow ready. And then compare that to the modern era of mushy foods, much larger plates. So the plates in the 80s started to go like this. By 95, they were like a platter.
Yeah.
And she said, look at the chews. There are about 3 chews to take a spoonful of mac and cheese and smush it around with your tongue and teeth and swallow. 3 chews. So imagine how much more food in a 15-minute period compared to our grandparents who were doing some meat and some fiber and whatever else they were eating. So over to Karen for her input on that.
Sifu, that is so true because, it takes your brain 20 minutes to realize your stomach's been fed. And if you're just shoveling in things that are easily swallowable, with very little chewing, that there's a ton of food that's getting into your belly before your brain even knows it's been fed. And so that, and then of course, like you said, the big, huge servings of food that we get, because that's what Americans want. You go somewhere else and the servings are more, human size. Yeah. These are like gargantuan size. But yeah, I mean, it's just the diet that we have morphed into has been one of convenience, one of just addictive, the addictive components of them, the foods that we're eating. It's criminal to me. I feel like it's just criminal that we've been led down this path.
One of my friends told me that during her last year of college, majoring in food science at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is a really good school. It's about 2 hours north of Santa Barbara and very highly reputed school. And she was good at science. And so she went into that. She started looking into what to do with that degree. And then she went out and got a job. And she's doing lab work, et cetera. And she's with people who have, of course, different levels of experience and tenure at this company. And she said she lasted a little under a year there because she saw what food science was programmed to do. It was programmed to get us addicted to certain things, get us to not be able to live without it, improve shelf life, improve the palatability of the food, the texture of the food, all these things that had nothing to do with just taking a natural product from a plant or a farm or an animal and allowing that to get to the end user the most healthful way possible and giving them something that was tasty. I mean, Joel Salatin, who's a famous farmer from West Virginia or Virginia, I can't remember, but he's famous. Look him up, Joel Salatin, and he's an expert on farming. And the food that he grows, 30 different things with animals and plants, they're all tasty. And the restaurants can't, get enough of his produce. He would, of course, run out. It'd be nice if we had a few 100 million Joel Salatins out there doing this great growing and allowing animals to do what they're supposed to do, like the chickens do the digging near where the pigs and the cows are, and they remove all of the things that are toxic to animals and create smell and all these things. So he's the way to do it, and many other people as well, not this laboratory of changing the way humans have been doing things for hundreds of thousands of years, all because of this impulse, this addiction, the shelf life, and the corporatization of the world. So over to Karen for her thoughts.
Yeah, Sifu, it's really, like I said, I think it's criminal the way the food industry has been able to make us addicted. But they wouldn't stay in business if we didn't keep going back for more. That's the problem. Is that I don't think. Yeah, especially, my specialty is working with people who have sugar addictions, and sugar is no different than cocaine or heroin. Yeah. It does the same thing. It lights up the same part of your brain, and they know that. They know the sweet spot that they can get to when they are putting ingredients in foods that right. They want mouthfeel, they want shelf life, they want the sweetness. Everything has sugar in it because sugar is so addictive. So things that you wouldn't expect to have sugar in them have sugar in them. Spaghetti sauce, salad dressing,
Yeah.
soup, all kinds of things have some level of sugar in it, because that's what keeps you coming back for more.
Yeah.
And it's unconscionable. And then the chemicals, your body doesn't know what to do with the chemicals because it doesn't recognize them as food. And so they store, your body stores those chemicals in your adipose tissue, making it more difficult to get rid of said adipose, your fat cells. It's hard to get rid of the fat. You have to be able to detoxify in order to push those toxins out of your body, and then the fat will start to shrink. They never go away, but they'll start to shrink. But it's really they've made us very sick. And we've supported that because we keep buying the food. If we didn't do that, if we didn't buy the food, then they couldn't stay in business. But we do buy the food because we are addicts. We do buy the drugs because we are addicts. That's what we do. And the farmers, a lot of farmers are highly subsidized to grow corn. So now you're taking corn and putting it in everything. You're feeding the animals corn that aren't supposed to eat corn. And then you have to medicate them because they're eating corn and they're not supposed to, and it makes them sick. So now you have to medicate them. Now if we're eating meat, I don't eat meat, but if we are eating meat that is from a factory farmed animal, that animal has been eating things that it wasn't supposed to, that it was not intended to eat. Then it's being medicated because it got so sick. Plus it's crowded in with a bunch of different other of the same animal. So you've got all that stress because they're supposed to roam free and they're not roaming free. And so you've got all that stress that's built into their tissue, and you're consuming all of that when you eat that meat. Yeah. So all of that, and that changes the molecular structure of their meat. So you're consuming all of this bad stuff, and then we wonder why we're getting sick.
Yeah. Can you tell us if your addiction, your impulses, your tendencies changed when you became physically active, as in the right picture? Can you tell us about how that affected those human predispositions?
Yeah. So first of all, when I changed everything, I started out with my dietary choices because I was very sick from the chemo. I wasn't eating a whole lot when I was going through chemo. And it took me a while to come back from that because it made me very weak. So I didn't start the physical stuff quite as, I started that after I started to feel better. But what it does, the physical stuff, I'm always of the mind that if I've exercised, I sure as hell don't want to, excuse my language, I don't want to consume something that's going to undo the good I just did for myself, right? So that's kind of the mentality that I have. But also, it just feels better. If you're taking care of your body, you want to continue to do that. And it just sort of builds on itself. I don't want to eat the stuff that's going to make me feel bad because I know what it's going to do to me. And I know I've gone all this time without having that. Why would I do that now? And why would I want to undo the good that I've done for myself? My primary nature is to go for the stuff that's going to help me, as opposed to reaching for the quick thing. So I'm really cognizant of that.
That's really good. Well, I'm so thankful that you and I have been able to share this moment, because you've lived through a very challenging part of your life, and you've taken that disaster and you've converted that in a way to give back to others and to reinvigorate your message by helping people, and then you continue to stay on your program. And I think that's a really good marriage between two things, because people who have a predisposition that's in their background, it's still a little cell somewhere in our neurology that knows that if we really have this craving, or we break down, or we give up in some way, or a bunch of bad stuff happens to us, breaks us down, we could go back to that, just like a smoker, just like a sex addict, whatever. It's still part of our predisposition. So you keeping on track through your own program and through helping others, I would guess reinforces that. Before I jump over to this guy, tell me if that statement makes sense.
Yeah, Sifu, it absolutely, I feel like I need to be a living example of what I talk about. And when I'm out in public and people, having food with people, a lot of people watch what I eat, and they think I'm watching them. and I'm not, because it's not my business how you eat. If you want to ask my advice, I'm happy to give it to you, but it's not my business how you eat. And I'm not paying attention to their plate. But they're very self-conscious around me because they know that I stick to certain things, and I don't typically deviate from them. And so they tell me how, they admire me. Well, it's not even, to me, it's no different than you eating whatever it is you're eating, or they're eating whatever these are the choices that I make. And but I feel that, our brains, our brains are wired to want that pleasure, that dopamine hit, and the sugar absolutely gets you that dopamine hit. But just like a drug, it takes more and more sugar to reinvigorate that dopamine. Every time you do it, it's going to take another dose.
Yeah. The studies I've read on cocaine, I do a lot of work on researching athletes and listening to their stories, and cocaine has been very prevalent in the 20th century, and I'm sure in the 21st century, in the lives of athletes. It makes you feel good. It actually can be a medicine in certain instances. Like when I had a septoplasty on my nose, they go up there and they're cutting things out of the inside of my nose, the turbinates. It's a pretty heavy duty procedure. And you know how a bloody nose is, it can just keep going. So what they do is they use a solution that has a certain percentage of cocaine to help stop the bleeding. And it worked. And I had a good operation. I'm hoping everyone else who needs an operation has a good operation with good practitioners and good recovery, et cetera. But it's something that when I researched cocaine, the experts said that the highest you ever get is the Very well said, Karen. I'm going to take us over to Ken Berry, MD. What a great name for a health doctor. Ken Berry, and we'll see what he says about the junk food habit. And if you ever see this, I'd love to interview you for this YouTube channel and have you come on and share your message. So I'm going to see if Karen can hear this play.
But they are going to make it less hard. And that's very important for you to understand. There is some work for you to do. You are going to have to snap to and stand up straight and put your thinking cap on and be ready to do some work. But once you get on the other side of your junk food habit, your junk food addiction, you're going to feel so much better, and your health is going to improve so much that I promise you it's going to be worth it. So let's jump right in. First and foremost is admit that you have a problem.
So there we are with Ken. What do you think about what he said so far? Does he compel you to want to listen to more, Karen?
Yeah, sure. But he's absolutely right. You have to know that you have a problem in order to face it. So if you're not going to admit it, then you're just going to be, as they say, fat, dumb, and happy.
So years ago, my mom was going through cancer, and I know that they were still doing sugar, they were still doing ice cream. And I told them, I said, look, your doctor at the famous hospitals in Boston and in New York, they didn't tell you to not do any sugar. No, they didn't tell us that. So they said, what did they tell you? Well, we've got chemo, we've got radiation, we've got potential surgery, we got all these things. And they're really good doctors, well-funded, highly regarded, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what's feeding your cancer? My parents have a farm and a garden. They have very high taste when it comes to food. Bishop's Market down on Route 22 is one of their places. The fish market right there in, I think it's White House on Route 22.
Yeah,
It's,
Metropolitan Fish.
Metropolitan Fish Market. That's is about as high end as you would get in Manhattan. It's probably a $60 bill when my dad goes there just for himself, to get some clams and some seafood. It's really high-end stuff. They're about as high as you can get these days without having your own fishing boat and knowing where the least toxins are in the ocean, right? So, but they're doing all this stuff right. But my mom's got cancer, and her doctors, whom I saw, I went into the Boston hospital where she was being treated for chemo with these different colored plastic, I think, little containers, and I saw the tubes of this chemical going into her veins. And I talked to the therapist there assisting my mother, the cancer tech, and I said, do you tell, I thought she was a really nice woman, and I'm talking to her, I said, I'm a health person and I work in that business. Do you tell these people what to eat? And she said, most of the time we don't, because they won't follow our protocol anyway, and we have so many clients waiting that we can't do that. I said, why don't you send them to a health coach, nutritionist, etc., integrative medicine doctor, so they can work on that part. She said, that's a really good idea. Our model is not that. We're a cancer treatment place that makes, she didn't say this, but I know, cancer treatment place that makes a lot of money, and they sell all their new techniques, their new research, their new machinery. They sell that to these sick people and their families, and it's really a calamity. Over to you, Karen.
Yes, I agree with you, Sifu. When I was going through my cancer, there was not a single. They told me to keep not to lose weight, to keep my weight up. Not to make sure I was eating enough to keep I was obese. You saw what I looked like. But not to lose weight. I ended up losing 28 pounds while I was going through chemo. And oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned, I also had a heart attack in 2017, which I believe was attributable to one of the drugs that they had me on, because that had a cardiac implication to it.
Yes.
And so it was, chemo is the gift that keeps on giving. But the thing about cancer treatment is they just want to give you the drugs and send you on your way. They do not give you any kind of nutritional guidance. There was never a suggestion that I speak to anybody about it. Nothing. I did it all on my own. I did all my own research, and the thing that stood out to me is that sugar feeds cancer. Sugar feeds, especially the processed crap that we get. The cancer loves that stuff.
It feeds bad bacteria in our system.
Yeah.
It feeds bad things to our neurology, bad things to our blood sugar. Sugar messes us up. And before I go back to my background, my video background, virtual background, I want to hear about Jack LaLanne, a very caring individual who had sugar addictions, junk food addictions, even back in the 1920s when he was a young person. And I think he was born in somewhere around 1918, somewhere in there. He died in 2011 at 96. And I met Jack LaLanne, and he's been a life changer to countless people around the planet. But as he got into health, got into fitness, became more grounded, he had a really high energy, like a hyperactive mentality and physicality. And so he got into all that stuff, and he could, I'm one of those people, I'm a devotee, but he could outwork most anybody. He's the ever-ready battery. And he wrote, 10 books. He had the longest running one-man radio show. He had the longest running one-man TV show. And he's just a giving person. And he still did 4 to 5 hours of fitness and swimming for himself each and every day. His wife, when I met them, she was in her 80s. He was in his 80s. She was in her 70s. I met him up in Tahoe. And he had already done, he was, that old, and he'd already done 4 hours of fitness, and she had done 2.5. I mean, this guy's amazing. Listen to Jack LaLanne giving us a message in his 40s about how his father was just the typical American diet, the SAD, standard American diet, or what did you call it?
It's the SAD diet. Yeah, it is
Okay, here, let's listen to Jack for a minute about his father.
Have a crossword between them, and a tremendous provider, one of the finest, most unselfish men. Any people ever talked about John LaLanne, they always said, what a fine man. My dad used to pride himself. in setting a fine table. I guess it was the fact that he was poor for so many years of his life, when he was a boy and they didn't have much food. So all the money that he made went to buy food for us. And you could come into our house anytime you wanted, and we could feed 15 people just like that. So naturally, my dad did all the buying. He'd come home from work at night and he'd buy all these groceries and he'd sit down to this gargantuan meal and he'd overeat. And after dinner, his favorite hobby would be turning on the radio and listening to his favorite radio program. It was Amos and Andy then. He'd listen to that for a while. And then after the program, he'd fall asleep and he'd stay there till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd get up and go to bed. Well, this went on for quite a few years, and I could see my dad failing. He was losing his zest for living, his energy and vitality, and he was getting all these extra pounds, and he couldn't move around like he used to. His teeth and eyes were going bad on him, and I could just see him slipping. So I went to my dad and I says, Dad, I said, why don't we start doing something? Set you up a good program of exercise. I had a little gym in the backyard, and I wanted him to do some exercise with me and get on a good program of nutrition. My mother, she had a breakdown, and she went along with us, and she's at 77 now, one of the greatest people you've ever seen. Well, my dad, he said, well, that exercise for you young kids, and he wouldn't go along one bit. Well, anywho, remember one day, he was still a young man, just in the prime of his life. He had everything ahead of me. He says, kid, he says, I'm not feeling too well. I wish you'd take me over to the hospital. We took him over to the hospital for a checkup. And 3 days later, my dad was dead of what? A cirrhosis liver and a diseased heart. 2 things that definitely could have been prevented. My dad actually committed suicide. He took his own life by disregarding nature's laws. Well,
So that's something that I showed my mom in the car on a laptop up at Cape Cod when she was going through this treatment, and she got emotional and she said his father did not commit suicide. And when she said that, I knew I could not have a rational conversation with her, and I really didn't know what to do at that point besides say, how about not doing the ice cream, Dad, not being the enabler to this ice cream and sugar addiction, and just keep eating all of the other good food that you eat, and doing some movement, doing some water aerobics, these types of things. But I didn't know what to do once she told me that Jacqueline's father didn't commit suicide. I didn't know what to do. What do you do with something like that, Karen?
Sifu, I really don't know. I feel like you can let them know that the information is available and you're happy to help, but that it has to be their decision. I've had so many people come to me and say, I wish my wife would talk to you. I wish my daughter would talk to you. But and it's usually men who could probably use my help as well. But it really is important for the individual to make a decision on their own, because you can force feed them the information, but they're not going to use it. It's just like anything. They're not going to, if they don't want to know about it. Sugar is a very difficult thing to, first of all, admit that you're addicted to, or even identify the addiction in yourself. You may not realize that you're addicted to it, but it's also, there's a lot of emotion attached to that. Yeah. And giving it up is very scary for people. And when I work with people, I try to take away that fear or help them to get through that fear so that they are able to get through it. Because if you get rid of sugar, if you completely eliminate sugar and refined carbohydrates from your diet, from everything, from your consumption for 3 to 4 days, you will be over the addiction. You'll go through some withdrawal, possibly. And those withdrawal symptoms are not minor necessarily. I mean, they can be real withdrawal symptoms. But once you do, you come out with clarity of thought, you sleep better, your aches and pains are at least abated, if not gone away completely. You've got a lot more energy. You feel better, just generally feel better. You have a sense of euphoria about you. It's amazing the difference in the way you feel. But it is a very frightening thing for people to try to do it. I've had so many people try to negotiate their way out of certain foods that they like to eat. And to me, you can't use a little bit of cocaine and not be affected by it. You can't eat a little bit of sugar. You got to stop. In order for you to really get over the addiction, you've got to stop.
Maybe my mother, thanks Karen for sharing that. Maybe my mother was really telling me, I mean, she's come to me, she's been passed on since 2013, so 10 years. She's come to me in what some people might call spirit world with messages. And, we had our good times and our not so good times. I'm very rational. I'm a deep emotional person, but when it comes to a fact and a philosophy. I'm a very rational person. I don't allow people's proclivities and emotions to circumvent rational thought. Now, I'm not saying each fact I have is right, but I'm saying based on this fact, this is the philosophy, this is the argument. So that's how my mind tends to work in a rational, intellectual, fair intellectual discussion, not an unfair one where you're using different techniques to trip somebody up and call them names. So I think maybe what she was doing is really telling me that I was right, but inside she was hurting, and she had some remorse and regrets about not taking care of some aspects of her health over the course of her life, like smoking from age 14, I think, until age 40 something. So that's her cancer started in her lungs. That's where she started feeling it. And then it went to her lymph and to her brain. So she had stage 4, and she got, I think, 3 to 4 years of living out of that, maybe 70% pretty good living. But I think when it came to that question I had in showing her that Jacqueline video, I think that was probably just a reaction. His dad didn't commit suicide. She was just kind of bonding with the dad because the dad was trapped just like my mother was trapped.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see who I think that for her to, when you showed her that video and she saw the way Jacqueline discussed it, I feel like like you said, she bonded, she identified with the father, and she certainly does not want to be thinking that she's doing that to herself. Nobody wants to think that, and especially given the fact that she has her son is telling her this, or her family. Yeah, I can understand why she would go into denial about that. But I agree with you I agree with Jacqueline. I feel that that's a slow suicide. I have people in my life that are doing that, and it is a slow suicide, I think. And
so I wanted to share, I'm going to step away from the screen and share my dessert here. So this was over in Austria, and if you want to find a health conscious place, Austria would be really high on the list. So this was a dessert at a golf club in Kitzbühel, Austria, which is in the Alps, not too far from Salzburg. And so I have two waffles that I would guess are pretty well made, not poorly, distant ship box stuff, but made from scratch. It's a high-end restaurant. And then there's some sorbet. I think it's raspberry. And there's some ice cream with that, and there's some berries. Now, the berries don't have their antioxidant effect if you mix them with a milk product. So this this is whipped cream, another milk product. And it knocks out the antioxidant benefit, at least from the blood studies that they've done over the past few decades. So that's an interesting thing, and probably the most regretful thing I heard, because for years I did blueberries and yogurt. And to imagine all those good blueberries, part of their benefit with the antioxidants wasn't doing anything to me, according to the studies that I've seen, because of the milk product mixed in there. So that was, 4 decades of doing blueberry and yogurt, and I had to change that. And then the other thing, sorbet, if you don't have a blood sugar problem, and if your mind, body, and spirit are, highly functional, and the whipped cream and the waffle, it doesn't, and then there's some sauce right here, which is made with probably high sugar and fruit. For me, if I were sick, or if I were tired, or if my digestion was having some issues, I wouldn't do this. But because at the time everything was working and I wanted to treat myself to a little bit of a splurge and a high-end dessert, I enjoyed this. So that's a different type of a thing than someone who's going out to the bakeries and the candy stores maybe every day. I was up in Livermore, California, and they have a very high-end candy/bakery, and they've got the National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratory, 2,000 employees, and then a town of people in Livermore. And I went in there, and there was nothing in there that I would eat in terms of health and wellness. It was high sugar, fancy designs, the coated crust over a large dessert. And the people who went in there were by and large supersized people that I saw. And I asked the person working there, I said, do these people, how often do they come in? She said, some people come in once a day. Not very few people come in twice a day. And then some people come in periodically, but that's their once a day cocaine hit for many of these people to go into this place, just like 7-Eleven or some of these other places. They go in to have their favorite thing. Over to Karen for her thoughts, and then we'll wind it down.
Yeah. So Sifu, I think that when you treat yourself occasionally to something like that, you have a different mindset than somebody who is manically going for that sugar hit. You're having a treat of something that you never have, that you're enjoying calmly. You're not satisfying some kind of addiction. Yeah. And so I think that that's a much different digestion. That's a much different way that it's going to go into your body. It's not going to, and if all of your systems are in balance, it's probably not going to have a significant impact and long-term impact on your blood sugar. And so I think that is much different than somebody who's going into a bakery every day to get their cocaine hit, their cocaine equivalent hit. And they're going in, they may be going into that bakery once a day, but who knows how many other bakeries they're also going into, right?
They could be going into Safeway and having even a more low-end, higher chemicalized dessert that we don't know about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because people are embarrassed. They realize that what they're doing. And so, I used to work in a liquor store, and I'd have people come in and act like it was the first time they were there. And I know dang well that they were there yesterday and the day before and the day before that. So it's people are embarrassed to be known as a regular in a situation where they know they shouldn't be a regular. So they may spread the wealth and go somewhere else.
So your power, yourhealth.com, and people can book a free intro session with Karen Sammer. And as you can tell, she's caring and she's informed, and she'll hear your story and work with you to the degree that you want. And so that's a wonderful way to operate. Anything else you'd like to share about working with you, Karen, before we wind down?
I just want to say that, I've had clients who've been able to come off of medication, who've been able to avoid medication. I had somebody drop their cholesterol 70 points working with me for 6 months. I had somebody who was out of control on diabetes, on diabetes medicine and blood pressure medicine. Both of those conditions were out of control. We worked together for within a few months. The numbers were better than the doctor had ever seen on this person. So it's really, the work is, it works. If you do the work, it works. And I'm happy to work with people that are willing to work on themselves. And the consultation, the free consultation that they get is very beneficial. Whether they decide to continue working with me or not, they will walk away with some good action steps. So it really is time well spent.
Do psychologists respond to what you do and try to work with you and sharing some of their clients and patients to have your therapy make an impact?
That's an interesting question, Sifu. I have not approached therapists about this, and I probably should. But the issue, one of the roadblocks that I have found is that I am not currently covered by insurance. My services, health coaching is not covered by insurance. But there are people that are still willing to pay to keep their health in order. I think it's important. It's an important investment. It's not an expense. It's an investment. So but I think thank you for the thought. Maybe I'll go out and start canvassing some psychologists and let them know what I do. Yeah,
maybe in some networking meetings and some conferences, you could go out and meet some people. That would be good. And I'm sure maybe some of them are suffering from their own addictions to poor choices when it comes to what the things that you're involved in coaching people on with food and et cetera. So maybe they could become patients of yours. I wanted to share that the psychology and the sociology of what I do, physical movement, good nutrition, good sleep, all the wellness stuff that you can do in reading books and writing, using your mind and creative ways and ways to learn, not just being a channel flipper or an internet flipper, slowing down, reading a book by the fire or out on your front porch or in your car. I do a lot of work in my car under a tree somewhere and try to do 2 or 3 hours there and then go on to my next thing. Those are all things that I teach people. So it's a lifestyle, and the lifestyle I do is kind of the scholar athlete lifestyle. It's just like somebody who's 21 and in college that's working on their learning, working on their sports, and and being socially active on the causes that they find important in life, and then social with friends and family, all that. So that's basically the life I started in my college era. I'm still doing it now at 61. And some people think that I can dance like a college student, probably better than the current ones, but similar to the college students when I was in college, and then maybe in the 90s when they were doing all this Michael Jackson type dancing. And it's because I do that mind, body, and spirit, and everything is loose and functional. And you talked about the rhythm and feeling the beat and all that stuff. If I stop doing what I do, like a little hour-and-a-half workout out in the park in the snow in Colorado this morning, all bundled up, if I stop doing that, I'm no longer that same vivacious, vitality-filled individual. And my psoas muscle down near the hip socket, that's not going to work. I have to treat that really well every day. The right side is the side that's dysfunctional. I do all that stuff every day. And then when I slip in the parking lot, like coming out of Whole Foods, I slipped. And you're much better off being fit and prepared and grounded and well in your mind, body, and spirit, because something always happens. There's always a little, life happens.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's absolutely true, Sifu, because had you slipped and fallen, you could have broken something significant. But if you're keeping everything healthy, maybe it wouldn't break, or maybe your balance would have caught you. You'd been able to catch yourself, as opposed to just letting nature take its course. And it really is important all the way up till the day you don't wake up. I think it's really important.
Keep on it. It's a good charge, CHARG. It's a good charge, and it's got so many benefits. And I believe once you get onto the maintenance level and your health and wellness and your use of your brain and your addictions and your proclivities, you really become a master of self, a black belt of your own self. And then it's all just maintaining that. It's almost recreational. The practice is recreational. The transformation is not recreational. You have to do it to get to where you want to be. But the maintenance, to me, is just like flossing your teeth, just like preparing your meal. It's just part of the day. It's not a big deal like the transformational people who are trying to lose weight or trying to get their back or neck back into some sort of a functionality. So why don't we say goodbye now? And then if you have something that you want to talk about, maybe you could and interview me sometime about that. We could either put it on your channel or my channel, but it'd be fun to hear, you tap into me in a different way that I tapped into you today. And we'll try to keep this conversation going so people are informed, and you and I are bouncing ideas off each other and increasing our development in this wonderful lifestyle.
Absolutely. I'm happy to do that, Sifu. I am going to be starting my own podcast soon, and I will keep you informed, because I'd love to have you as somebody who would bring some really good value to it.
That sounds great, Karen. I appreciate it. And we've mentioned your website, so people tap into that, and I'll put it down in the comments. And please like, and please leave a comment or a question down below. Karen and I will do our best to respond in due time. So thanks so much, folks, and wishing you all the best in your health, happiness, and wellness. Aloha.
Namaste.
Namaste.